What is going on, kids? It is your doctor, Dr. Remy LeBeau, and I'm coming at you once again from the X-Layer to provide you my very deep and insightful reaction into the latest 2 episodes of Loki. I'm going to be talking about Loki seasons are not relevant when we're talking about MCU shows. So the mini-series of Loki that may have another season, we don't know. Episodes 3 and 4. Now, I was going to do one last week, but I decided not to because I kind of felt like last week felt sort of like a segment of something rather than a whole sort of overall kind of movement within the show, which ultimately, with the last 2 episodes, you make up, the central act of a 3-act structure of a movie, which is ultimately what these shows are, just like long movies, long MCU films. And so this episode sort of solidified that for me. This felt like the second half of last week, all becoming one sort of logistically just cohesive storytelling sort of device to get us through to whatever's going to happen in the last 2 episodes, which I'm sure are going to be fucking awesome because things are crazy and they're only about to get even more crazy. Now, of course, if you have not watched the episodes, do not watch this video because I'm going to be spoiling the shit out of it, and therefore not a good idea for you guys to be watching this unless you've watched the show. You got to have a good time with it. You don't want some douchebag on the interwebs to spoil some shit for you. Like, you want the show to be what it is and just have that natural experience. All right, guys. I'm really enjoying the sort of the way the show is going. It's a very sort of interesting story they're telling, one that is unexpected, one that ultimately is sort of about Loki, but really about a lot bigger forces that are at work within the Marvel universe. Now, this whole concept of there being one timeline is somewhat problematic, because if you think about like what happened at the beginning of this 4th episode, when we see Sylvie as a little girl. And by the way, shout out to the little girl that played Sylvie. She is the one that plays Judith on The Walking Dead, and she is fantastic on that show. If you have not watched the show in a while or recently, The Walking Dead, like, Judith is, 6, 7, 8, I forget what, 10 maybe. And she's played by this actress, and she does a great job. Like, she's very much one of those like child actors that's very sort of mindful of what it takes to be authentic in acting versus just like, I'm a kid and my parents are forcing me to act to make money for them and I'm just adorable, but I can't fucking relay authenticity, right? She can do that, and she was a perfect choice to play Sylvie. She only had a few moments, but nonetheless, like, she had a good amount of sort of that kind of gravitas that she already has, like she carries with her, that is really delightful and always brings something special to whatever she's in, clearly. And she's proven that with this episode. But the idea that there is one timeline, but somehow there exists this alternate universe where a female version of Loki exists that existed on Asgard, that would be, I guess, a parallel Asgard. So then the question is, like, this one timeline, are there parallel universes within that one timeline? I think that's something that's important. I'm sure it'll be addressed at some point. Because clearly, I mean, now, if you saw the after credits scene for episode 4, we have 4 more Lokis showing up, right? So that ultimately is going to, and they all look different. Clearly, there's a black man, there's a little kid, there's an old man, there's I forgot what else, but nonetheless, like, they are clearly not Loki as we know Loki. And I think the ideas that we're going to sort of explore moving forward are going to set the foundation for what's to come in Spider-Man No Way Home, and then Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. I think that the logic of sort of parallel universes and different versions of characters existing is sort of going to be, at least the seeds will be planted here. And I think that will ultimately play in also to what happened in WandaVision with Pietro, because I never bought the Bonner thing, whatever the fuck, the random neighbor bullshit that that Quicksilver is supposed to be Evan Peters. I know that is a version of Quicksilver from the multiverse, and I know that he is a different version of Wanda's brother, and the way the multiverse exists will allow for that to be possible, and therefore ultimately redeem that particular segment of the show that people are all about just like writing off, like, no way, it's not him. It's like, Kevin Feige picked the fucking actor from the X-Men films to play Quicksilver. Clearly, I think this is going to be the plan. I think Kevin Feige is going to pick and choose the versions of characters that are most popular. Because I read something where he was talking about like the Defenders from Netflix, and he was like, you know, people really like that version of Daredevil and Jessica Jones, and I think he might have mentioned Luke Cage as well, but he did not mention Iron Fist. So I think he might have mentioned the Punisher as well. So I think ultimately, like, we're gonna see the versions that people like. So clearly that Quicksilver was the better Quicksilver in the X-Men you know, if we're looking at the X-Men films versus Avengers: Age of Ultron. So Evan Peters, I'm assuming, will ultimately play the Quicksilver. It's not necessarily the Quicksilver from the exact dimension that exists within the X-Men films from Fox, but it is a Quicksilver who happens to look like that Quicksilver, right? And I think that will ultimately be the explanation for a lot of it. And so I'm thinking they're going to use like Legion from the Legion show, because, like, why not? You've developed the son of Xavier, you know? And the dude that played him is the dude that played the Beast in Dan Stevens, I think is his name, in the Beauty and the Beast show. So I can totally see them using Dan Stevens as like Legion. Like, why not just bring him in? You know, bring in Polaris from The Gifted. Now, The Gifted ultimately, you know, middling level sort of show and storytelling overall. Clearly, they weren't interested in building it up to something spectacular, but people liked Polaris, and she was young enough that in a couple of years, in these last couple of years, and maybe a couple more years, she'll be older, and she has a lot of charisma, and people liked her, and I liked her. So, like, maybe they'll bring her in, you know? Like, you can pull in these actors just like they're doing for Spider-Man No Way Home, right? They're bringing Alfred Molina in as Doc Ock, and they're bringing in what's his name that played Electro? I can't remember his name. I can't remember. Jamie Foxx. That played Electro. Obviously, they're going to do a better version of that character, but it's going to be connected to this sort of multiverse. So the idea is, I think that a multiverse exists, and that when there is time travel within that multiverse, and there are branches that should not be happening because time travel is creating those branches, then therefore the TVA is in charge of kind of eradicating those branches. But I'm sure they're going to explain something where, like, the universe is part of like a multi-dimensional sort of structure. I'm going to assume, because again, if not, then it doesn't explain Sylvie, unless something else branched off that version of Asgard, which was maybe something that they wanted to happen. I don't know. I have no idea. I'm sure it'll all be explained. If I had to sit down and explain it, I'm sure I could, but I don't want to, because fuck it. It's a show, and this shit is all abstract and made up anyway, so I don't need to fucking go through the logic of it. But what I'm thinking is, like, clearly it's all like building to something. And like, I see like them bringing in Venom, you know, Tom Hardy, but not the exact Venom from the Venom film, fortunately, even though I really like the depiction of Venom in those films. I don't like the first film, like, overall. I don't think it's great, but Venom himself, I thought, was portrayed really well. You know, definitely better than in Spider-Man 3. So, like, you can bring him in, and if you guys have been reading the comics, King in Black, the whole Null, which is like this symbiote god, and like they really made a huge mythology with that character. I mean, I could totally see them doing like some crazy big storytelling that could ultimately lead to a major crossover where, you know, like a symbiote god comes to Earth, and a lot of stuff that happened in King in Black ish kind of happens in the MCU. It's a big event that could happen. It could maybe take up like 5 years worth of storytelling, right? And I think a lot, and then of course the X-Men, they're going to bring in actors from the movies that worked and then recast people. If Hugh Jackman wants to come back, maybe they'll bring him back, maybe they won't, maybe they'll recast Wolverine, but then also bring back Hugh Jackman for like a moment, who knows, right? There's all sorts of possibilities. I'm very excited about the whole thing. But clearly there are questions, and I have them, and I think we're going to get some answers to that in the forthcoming episodes, given what we saw in the after credit sequence. So episode 3, we had Loki and Sylvie go to the TVA, and then they try to get to the timekeepers. They don't get there. They wind up on that moon that is going to be destroyed by the mother planet, right? That's like breaking up. And ultimately, you know, a couple of important things happened in that episode. One, we found out that the TVA agents are actually variants. And then 2, we found out that Loki is pansexual, bisexual, definitely not just like your standard sort of homosexual person, which is an interesting aspect of him. And then we sort of start to see these two characters kind of lining up, but also being different, and kind of highlighting sort of the idea of there being different versions of the same being that are completely different, but also similar. And then, of course, beyond that, it was all spectacle, right? It was like the place is falling apart. There's like some class struggle with respect to who's going to survive. It's all very bleak. Clearly, nobody's ultimately going to survive. And then we get big action sequences towards the end, which I liked. I enjoyed them. There were like some long takes, sort of interesting things that happened within that little town where that ark was going to take off and save people, but ultimately got destroyed. It was all very big and sort of showy and kind of what you expect from like Marvel, right? And it's all done very lovely. Clearly, they're using that technology, the stagecraft technology that was used in The Mandalorian, where you have, instead of green screens, you actually have these like perfectly projected backgrounds that are the action. So you're filming the characters within that action as opposed to filling that in later, which gives it a different flavor, you know? And so I do enjoy that. And ultimately it worked really well for me. And it was exactly the production value that I need from my Marvel shit. But clearly that was like a build-up to the things that happened in the next episode, right? We had that first sort of moment at the beginning where Sylvie and Loki are having that sort of moment of like, well, we're about to die. But then they start to kind of exhibit this like deep bond for each other. And then that creates like this weird kind of branch that even the TVA sort of thought was very foreign to them. This sort of, this almost perpendicular branch. You know, it didn't sort of parallel the timeline. It kind of started going off. And it sort of resulted from like the Lokis falling in love in a sense with each other. So like, what the fuck does that mean ultimately, right? Like, characters from alternate dimensions, if they align and sort of become more in line, then does that create like this sort of perpendicular dimension, which takes the timeline in like a right turn? And what does that mean? I don't know. I don't want to think it through because like it's too theoretical, and I'll just let them explain to me whatever their ideas are. But it's an intriguing concept, right? And it's one that we haven't really seen before. At least I haven't seen it before, and like I like it. It's fun. Then we had, of course, Mobius captures them, brings them back to the TVA. Loki tells Mobius that they're variants. And then we get that great sort of kind of prison moment with Loki where Jamie Alexander comes back as Lady Sif, with everybody's like been like, where the fuck's Lady Sif? Because I guess in the comics, the female Loki is actually Lady Sif that Loki has possessed. And so people were mentioning like, well, maybe she'll be revealed to be a female Loki, but ultimately the reality is that that's not the case. And we have this sort of weird fake Jamie Alexander, always kind of coming in and punching Loki. I thought that was fun. You know, she played it well. He played it well. It was fun. Kind of reminded me of the I don't know if you guys watched Angel, but like Angel season 5, you had, I think Gunn was in this sort of weird prison where like he repeated the situation where he had a fake suburban life and then his heart would be torn out every day by some like weird, like, punishing type of executioner type of character. Anyway, it was very reminiscent of that, but I think ultimately that harkens to like I think is it Chinese? It might be like a Chinese concept of hell, where you're sort of, it's not hell, it's sort of purgatory, where you're sort of reliving the sins of your past until you're sort of cleansed of them, I think. I don't know. It's an interesting concept. I like that they did that here. It was fun. And then ultimately we get all our characters to go to the timekeepers. We have the other female agent who the female Loki had under control. She takes her away, and then she starts to realize, oh shit, there's variants. Mobius sees the video of the other agent that Sylvie was talking to at that tequila bar at the beginning of episode 3, where she's like basically aware of the fact that she's a variant. So it all sort of comes together. Mobius, clearly the timekeepers or whomever, because we find out they're androids, know that he has been exposed to the truth, and therefore it's clear they want to get rid of him. His girlfriend, who ultimately may play a big role in the MCU moving forward, is willing to kill him. And so we have that sort of interesting moment of them going into the timekeepers room, where we see these weird fucking android things. I love the production design on it. It was so fucking like Wizard of Oz, but like Return to Oz. If you've ever seen Return to Oz, the Disney movie. If you haven't, it's on Disney Plus. You should check it out, because it's really kind of odd and kind of a dark, bleak vision of Oz that was really fun, and it's really fun to watch. I don't know, I enjoy it. I watched it recently. I hadn't seen it since I was a kid, and I enjoyed it. So anyway, so it was just like these weird kind of interesting puppets, and ultimately they realize that they are androids, and therefore the question is like, well, who the fuck is actually in charge of the TVA, which is an interesting concept. Like who's really behind this? Maybe it is Kang, Kang, this time traveler who is a descendant of Dr. Doom from the future, who is just mischief embodied. I maybe he'll play a role here, maybe he won't. I don't know. But Mobius fucking gets killed, which is shocking. And then you have the agent that finds out that she's a variant from Sylvie, comes in, helps Loki and Sylvie, frees them. That's what allows them to find out the stuff about the timekeepers. But then fucking Loki is fucking annihilated at the end, right? And I'm thinking, shit, the minute that happened, I was like, oh, damn. I was like, oh, are they doing this? I was like, oh, so are we like transitioning to a new Loki, like this female Loki, and like she'll be the Loki from now on? And that's sort of where the show left me until we saw the after credit sequence. And then Loki pops up somewhere, right? Some place. And that place is the same place that apparently other variants go. And therefore Mobius may still be alive. And who knows what other types of variants are out there. Oh, by the way, there was mention of vampires. But I think vampires were mentioned in Guardians of the Galaxy as well. So clearly vampires exist in the universe, not just on Earth. And so that's an interesting element. Clearly we know that Blade is going to come down the pipeline at some point. So they're sort of starting to lay hints like, hey, there's vampires in this universe, and they're all over the place. So we'll see where that goes, which is fucking interesting as hell. But ultimately the question is like, okay, well, what the fuck is going on? Where's this going to go? And I have no idea. But I'm really enjoying the whole thing. I mean, how could you not? This is Marvel. Like I never bet against these folks. Everything they've done has been satisfying in some way or another. The interconnectedness, the ability to tell these stories in such a unified, cohesive way throughout various mediums, throughout various creators, throughout various storylines and different sort of IP, is masterful. And it's something that only Kevin Feige has been able to pull off in the history of Hollywood. Everybody else is trying to copy him, but they don't know what the fuck they're doing because they are not legitimate fans like he is. And the people don't seem to understand, like, you have to actually be a fan of these things, and then you also have to be a good producer. You have to be both things. Not just like Jeff Johns, who's like a fan of these things, clearly he knows the stories of DC, but he is not really a fucking producer, you know? So, you know, there's a lot of things there's a lot of stars that have to line up in order for things to work. And clearly nobody else has been able to figure it out, but Marvel has, and I love every fucking thing. And I can't wait for more. And I can't wait to see what happens in the next couple episodes here. And I can't wait to see what happens moving forward. I mean, we've got Shang-Chi, we've got Black Widow, which I'm hearing good things about and I'm really excited about seeing. We've got Shang-Chi is the accurate pronunciation. Shang-Chi coming in, I think September, October, and that is going to have the Abomination in it, and Wong, Doctor Strange's colleague. That's so cool. I love that they're interweaving these elements. Like, we haven't seen Abomination since one of the first MCU films, right? The Incredible Hulk, which has had a mixed result. And the fact that the Hulk was recast always kind of made it like the redheaded stepchild of the MCU. But clearly they're not. Well, I mean, they already acknowledged it with General Ross, who appeared in Civil War and then subsequently in I think both Infinity War films. Infinity War and what was it? Oh my god, Endgame. Infinity War and Endgame, the two Avengers films, the third one and the fourth one. So they're already acknowledging elements of that. There were rumors that Abomination is going to show up in the She-Hulk show, and so this could be sort of a precursor. Now, I believe it's rumored or it was announced that Shang-Chi takes place during the blip, so during the 5 years. And so it's interesting if you think about it, like, because Doctor Strange is gone, so Wong is on his own. I'm assuming a lot of the sorcerers are gone. The Abomination, how did he get out of his prison? I'm thinking like a lot of people get out of prison, because you got to imagine that a lot of prison guards, a lot of people in charge left, meaning were dusted, and so a lot of things must have been unstable. Who knows? I don't know, but I'm very excited to find out. And everything is very exciting, and it's all connected, and it's wonderful, and I love it, and give me more. Anyway, those are my thoughts on episodes 3 and 4 of Loki. I hope all of you are doing well. Life is wild. We are moving forward. Things are improving, but not improving here in the U.S. and everywhere with respect to this pandemic madness. There's a Delta variant going around that's supposed to be stunting a bit of our progress in trying to get this resolved. And of course, a lot of people that are not willing to get vaccinated are responsible for allowing these new outbreaks to occur with this new variant, because they're the ones that are getting it. Everybody's spreading it, but they're the ones that are getting it, and that could ultimately create a lot of problems, obviously deaths, etc. Get vaccinated, folks. We can get through this. Let's get this done. Let's move forward. Anyway, I hope everybody's doing well despite the circumstances, and there's a lot of good stuff happening in the world beyond all the bad stuff, and it's important that we focus on it. And it's great to have entertainment of this sort to be able to kind of, just kind of heighten our ability to kind of transcend the silliness of it all. Anyway, I hope all of you are doing well, and I will be happily talking about this again next week, or maybe the week after, depending on the nature of next week's show. But either way, I will see you soon, and I hope everybody well. And as always, I'd like to remind you that if you haven't already, you better put an X in that box, because ain't nobody checking me. Take care, folks. Bye-bye.